Hey guys, so today we're going to go on to the next step in logic, and we're going to talk about entire arguments, a complete argument. And we have a word for that, and that's called the syllogism. All right, a syllogism is Aristotle's kind of argument. One can offer several different kinds of argument, and of course, as I've said before, and as you know, when we say argument, we mean a reasoning process, right? A set of premises and a conclusion. We've defined premise, we've defined proposition. You know what a conclusion is, the end of an argument. So there are different ways to present this reasoning process or argument. The most famous one is the syllogism. That's from Aristotle, all right? A syllogism always has, an Aristotelian syllogism always has a certain form, all right? And though I put a sample one there, we can think of it as this: two premises and a conclusion, and the premises lead to the conclusion, as you know. That's what they're supposed to do. Putatively, supposedly, the premises lead you to the conclusion. So that is mimicked over here. All right. So the syllogism, as I said, is Aristotle's form of argument. Aristotle recognized that you don't always argue this way. You don't always present your reasoning process or your argument in this form, okay? In fact, often when we offer an argument or a reasoning process, we do it in the form of what is called a chain argument, what is sometimes called a chain argument. Aristotle had his own word. A chain argument is like this form: if A then B, if B then C, if C then D, if D then E, if E then F, therefore if A then F, that kind of thing. And it can have any number of premises. Unlike a syllogism, which always has two premises, a chain argument can go on and on. You might say, I don't want to go to chemistry because Mike is there. If Mike is there, Bill's there. If Bill's there, Tom is there. If Tom is there, his creepy friend Larry is there. So therefore, I don't want to go to chemistry because Larry's there. That's a chain argument. Aristotle actually had his own word for that. Let me give that to you. That would make a good extra credit question. He called that a Sorites, that chain argument, okay? That form of special argumentation which Aristotle does not want you to use, he called a Sorites, okay? So we're not going to deal with that anymore. I'm just throwing that out there as a historical interlude. That's what Aristotle called it. What we want to deal with is Aristotle's form of argumentation, a syllogism, two premises and a conclusion. So let's dissect the syllogism a little bit. We've talked about propositions, terms, all of that. We know what a conclusion is. As I said, every syllogism is in this form. You have two premises and a conclusion. All right. Now, we could notice that, of course, there are three propositions in every syllogism. The two premises and the conclusion total up to three propositions, and that each of them is one of the four kinds of proposition. This one's an A, this one is an O, and this one is an E, okay? And that there, A, O, and then a conclusion of E, this is what we call a mood, okay? That is to say, there is a mood to every syllogism, because every syllogism has the three propositions, two premises, and a conclusion. And since you have four different kinds of proposition, A, E, I, O, and you're taking three of them at a time, right? That means you could have a total of 64 possible different moods for syllogism. Okay, so this is in the mood AOE, right? So EEE is a mood. AAI is a mood. EEA is a mood. EIEIO is a song, okay? But there's 64 possible ones here, right? Let's see the mathematical formula, n factorial over n minus t factorial, if you wanted to figure it out yourself. So 64 different moods. This is one of the 64. Okay, now then, let me erase that for just a moment, and I want us to think about the syllogism in slightly different terms. We know, of course, that you have three propositions. Well, every proposition has a subject and a predicate, so you could think of the syllogism as something like this, alternatively, okay? That is to say, I know there's a glare here, maybe you can see that better. That is to say, see if I can pull a book out here. See if I can pull a book out here. That is to say, you have subject, predicate, subject, predicate, subject, predicate 3 times over. Okay. Now then, we have parts to the syllogism just like we have parts to propositions. All right, so we have names for some of this. All right, so the first premise is called the major premise. All right, you need to remember that. This is called the major premise. The second premise is called the minor premise. Okay, major and minor premise. And then, of course, you know that the third proposition is just called the conclusion, right? Major premise, minor premise, and conclusion. Now, in addition, we're going to have, Aristotle will tell us, what is called the major term of the syllogism. So the major term is going to be in the major premise. So you have these 2 terms in this sample syllogism. So we know that the major term is going to be either X or Y. It is not both. It's one of the 2. So the way in which you can know it's the major term is that the major term is once in the major premise and it's once in the conclusion. So with that stipulation, you know that X is the major term. It's the only thing that fits the description. It's the only thing that's in the major term, the major premise and in the conclusion. Then there is a minor term. The minor term is in the minor premise. So it's one of these 2. It's either Y or it's Z. It is not both. The minor term appears once in the minor premise and it appears once in the conclusion. So this is the term in the conclusion. So therefore that means that Z is the minor term. Okay? So X is the major term, Z is the minor term. So then that leaves what is called the middle term. The middle term appears once in the major premise and once in the minor premise. In this case, the middle term clearly is Y. Okay? Y is the middle term in this case. So the middle term is never in the conclusion. Okay? The middle term is always in both premises. Okay? So that means if we look back at this schema, again, at this diagram of how it can be arranged, we know that the major term is one of these 2. It can be the subject or the predicate. We could invert these 2. It could be either one. And we know that the major term is one of these 2. Okay? And we know the minor term is one of these 2. Could be either one, subject or predicate, and it's one of these 2. So then we know that the middle term is one of these 2, and it's one of these 2. Right? So then the middle term can be either here and here, or here and here, or here and here, or here and here. Right? 4 different possibilities for the arrangement of the middle term. And that has a word too. That is called the figure of the syllogism. Okay? The figure of the syllogism is the arrangement of the middle term. Again, there are 4 possible arrangements. Here and here, here and here, here and here, or here and here. Those are the 4 possible arrangements of the middle term. Okay? That's called the figure. So we have the term mood, right? This is a sample mood. You know there are 64 possible moods. And then we have the figure, right? The 4 figures of the syllogism. Okay? Now then, something that makes this a little bit easier for us to remember, it's a tradition, it is a convention, something logicians have done for several centuries now, is that we have all agreed always to make the subject of the conclusion the minor term. Okay? It doesn't have to be that way, but we've all agreed to do that, and we've done it for centuries. All right? So in every normal syllogism, the minor term, while it could be either of these, we always make it this, which is the minor term, so we make that the major term. So then in every syllogism we'll deal with, right, for us, and basically every logician, the major term is always the predicate in the conclusion. The minor term is always the subject in the conclusion. Okay? That's just, again, a convention, an agreement, a way we've agreed to do that. So whatever here, whatever is in this position, subject of the conclusion, is going to be either here or here. It's never going to be up here. It's never going to be the major premise, because it's always the minor term. So whatever is the predicate of the conclusion is always one of these 2. It's either the subject or the predicate of the major premise, which makes it the major term. Okay. Now, one thing you want to be careful about is you don't get the terms of the syllogism, okay, major, minor, and middle, confused with the terms of a proposition. Every proposition has a subject and predicate, right? Subject, predicate, subject, predicate. And so every term of a syllogism, the major, minor, and middle, is a term of some proposition. It's either the subject or the predicate of some proposition, right? That's always going to be the case. Every term of a syllogism is a subject or a predicate of some proposition. Okay? So that's always, but always going to be the case. All right? Now then, again, think about the entire thing, the entire syllogism here. Okay? When we realize that there are 64 different moods here, we can have, again, AAA, OOO, III, EEE, AAO, AOA, AAE, on and on and on, right? 64 different ones. And we recognize that there are 4 different figures that could go in each one of those moods, right? Then the number of syllogisms we can actually make would be 256, right? Because we have 64 moods, we have 4 different figures, 4 different arrangements in the middle term. Both of those put together shows us we have 256 possible syllogisms. Okay, now, of course, that's always assuming that we follow the convention where the minor term is here and the major term is there. We could ignore that. We could change that. And that would mean that in reality, the total possible number would be 512. Oops. Sorry. Would be 512 possible syllogisms, right? 512 distinct. In other words, you could take any 3 terms. You could take dogs, cats, trucks, and then just begin. All dogs are cats. Some cats are trucks. No trucks are dogs, and on and on. You could make 512 different syllogisms, okay? Actually, you could do this, at your kitchen table. You could, some Saturday afternoon you had nothing to do. Take 3 terms at random and see if you can make all 512 distinct syllogisms. Okay, that's some Saturday you really have nothing to do, okay? Actually, there's a good question for you. What if I offered to give you an A if you just forget everything about logic, forget it all, and you just made all 512 distinct syllogisms with 3 random terms that you come up with, make all 64 moods, all 512 different syllogisms with those same 3 terms with no mistakes, and then I give you an A. How's that? Would that be reasonable? You can email me and tell me whether you think that's fair or not, or whether you're interested, whether you're game. I'm just joking, obviously. Okay, so this is the structure of the syllogism. This is the way it works. Now, I told you before, a fallacy, let me write, well, I'm having trouble with my board here. A fallacy, let's see, is a mistake in reasoning. Okay, a fallacy is a mistake in reasoning, right? So we say that a syllogism or a reasoning process or an inference is fallacious, okay, if it has a fallacy. Okay, let's take this one right here. All x are y, some y are not z, no z are x. That actually is not valid. That syllogism has a fallacy. That doesn't mean much to you now because you can't analyze it right now without having the system or rules we use to do that. I can see that it's not valid. The problem is in the y, if you're interested. The problem's in the middle term. So we have a system or a way of figuring this out, and we can spot fallacies with a system of rules that goes back to Aristotle also. I'm not going to get into that right now. But what I want you to remember is the structure of the syllogism. Okay? Remember what a mood is. Remember what a figure is. Remember how many possible syllogisms you can make. And I think you are good to go on all of that. All right, you listen to this as much as you can, this video, play it again, and learn the structure of a syllogism. But that's all for now, guys. All right, take